China just released its first major policy document on Taiwan in 2 decades. The move comes the same day Beijing ended its live military drill around the island. So what are the key takeaways? The document says even though Beijing will try its best to achieve what it calls peaceful reunification, it will not renounce the use of force. Reunification is how Beijing describes its efforts to take Taiwan. It sees the island as its rightfully Chinese territory, though the Chinese Communist Party has never ruled Taiwan. The regime's document also took aim at Taiwan's ruling party, the Democratic Progressive Party. It says authorities in that party are undermining the prospects of peaceful reunification, adding that these are obstacles that must be removed. In previous white papers, Beijing said it would not send troops or administrative staff into Taiwan after taking it over. That line was left out of the latest document. In response, Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen said Beijing's purpose is to threaten Taiwan. She also pointed out that the regime is trying to appeal to some Taiwanese politicians that are inclined to compromise with Beijing. What's more, Tsai criticized the opposition party. The same day China ended its military drill, the vice chair of the opposition party led a delegation to visit mainland China. While the Chinese Communist Party virus, which causes COVID-19, is still putting some Chinese cities under lockdown, a new virus has been detected in the country. Chinese media reports say at least 35 people in 2 provinces in northern China have been infected. The new virus is called the Langya Hennepin virus. Patients sickened with it often come down with flu-like symptoms, including cough, fever, and weakness. A report on the infection cited both Chinese and Singaporean scientists. Their research on the outbreak was printed by the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the most renowned medical publications. It's been discovered that the virus can be transmitted from animals to humans, though no human-to-human transmission has been found so far. What's more, experts believe the infection is lethal, but no deaths have been reported. The fatality rate remains unknown. It's reportedly similar to the Nipah virus, which comes with a fatality rate as high as 40%. Shrews have been named the infection's most likely carriers, with dogs and goats following behind. A new milestone for a grassroots organization that's helping people quit the Chinese Communist Party. At a rally, the organization announced that the number of people who've quit the CCP has reached 400 million. NTD's Jason Perry was there.
I'm here in Queens, New York at a rally, and they're celebrating reaching the milestone of 400 million people who have quit the Chinese Communist Party. To put that in perspective, that's about 70 more million people than the population of the United States. Now this number includes the Chinese Communist Youth League and the Young Pioneers, which almost all school-age children are forced to join. The movement to quit the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, began in 2004 after the Epoch Times published the 9 commentaries on the Communist Party. It details the dark history of the CCP, including the Tiananmen Square massacre and the persecution of Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, a spiritual practice based on truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. The organization is called the Global Service Center for Quitting the Chinese Communist Party. Millions of people have visited the website to disavow their affiliation to the CCP after learning of its atrocities and the tens of millions of people killed under its rule. Elmer Yuen, an activist and political commentator, shared how his family was affected by the CCP.
My mother is a Jehovah's Witness, and she went to a work camp, basically same as a working prison for 20 years. They say they'll let her go if she denied God. She refused. That's why she stayed for the whole term.
A local official also shared her thoughts.
People need freedom from being hurt, from just being controlled. I mean, everybody should live a good life. And having 400 million people behind you speaks for itself.
The president of the organization explained that some people quit the party using pseudonyms for safety reasons, and that the organization has a large team of auditors working 24 hours per day to audit the names of people who quit the CCP.
I hope more Chinese people will quit the CCP and a peaceful and free China will come up.
Many people have made the distinction that the CCP is not China and that the Chinese people will be free after the communist regime falls.
The United States is working with Japan to counter China's growing influence. That's according to comments from the U.S. ambassador to Japan. At the same time, Beijing is using its economic might to push for political change around the world. NTD's Chenny Wu has more.
The U.S. diplomat to Japan says that economic cooperation between Washington and Tokyo is going strong, with one of its top priorities set as countering China.
Japan and the United States were the #1 foreign direct investor in each other's countries. Not 1 year, but 2 years consistently. Now, this year's not done, but I think we're in a real strong position. That's all I'll say.
Ambassador Japan Rahm Emanuel called Beijing a top player of economic coercion, adding if Beijing doesn't like what you say politically, they put the muscles on you economically. He gave Japan as an example. The country saw Chinese shipments of rare earth metals blocked over a territorial dispute, while South Korea suffered Chinese business boycotts while it installed a U.S. missile defense system.
The idea that they could actually honestly say, we don't coerce, and then you have not one, not two, not three, many worldwide examples where they've used their economic market access to force a political change in a country. And I think everybody's woken up to that.
Emanuel is pushing the U.S. to deepen economic cooperation with Japan to counter that economic coercion. Key collaboration areas include semiconductors, batteries, and energy. Japan says it'll provide as much as $700 million to help U.S. firms boost memory chip output at a Japanese plant. American firms like Western Digital Corp and partner Kioxia Holdings are set to benefit from the deal. Meanwhile, Japanese industrial conglomerate Panasonic picked Kansas as the site for a new battery plant. The deal came together after President Biden talked with Panasonic executives in Japan.
Let's take a closer look at semiconductor cooperation. The United States and Japan plan to establish a new joint research center for next-generation semiconductors or microchips. That's amid the global shortage. Officials from the two longtime allies met Friday during an economic meeting in Washington. Chips are an essential component in nearly all electronics, from coffee machines to smartphones to fighter jets. The new R&D organization is meant to establish a secure source of them. Currently, Taiwan makes over 90% of the world's most advanced chips. But there's concern about supply stability as tensions rise between Taiwan and China. Beijing views the island as a renegade province and has threatened to take it by force. Details of the plan were not immediately released, but Japan's Nikkei Shimbun newspaper said research of 2-nanometer semiconductor chips would begin in Japan by the end of this year. It's said to include a prototype production line and should begin producing semiconductors by 2025. Up next, bad news for coffee lovers in China. Starbucks sales in China plummeted in the second quarter, largely due to the country's strict COVID-19 restrictions. In the 3-month period ending July 3rd, sales at Starbucks' Chinese locations, open at least 13 months, plunged a staggering 44%. The chairman of Starbucks China cited mobility restrictions and lockdowns implemented under China's zero COVID-19 policy. Starbucks' largest Chinese market is Shanghai, which was totally locked down for about 2/3 of the quarter. Poor profits in China led the company's international sales to fall 18% in the quarter. Starbucks sees China as one of its most important markets. The coffee giant has more than 5,700 locations there. Officials in Australia are placing partial inflation blame on the country's biggest trading partner, China. The country's treasurer says Beijing's pandemic policies are a factor out of Australia's control. Here's more.
An Australian official says China's COVID-19 policies are contributing to Australian inflation.
Now, China is our biggest trading partner by a long way. What happens with China's domestic economy has a direct link to our national activity and income and prosperity. And China's strict COVID containment measures have had a substantial impact on their output and have made existing supply chain disruptions even more severe.
On Thursday, Treasurer Jim Chalmers outlined Australia's deteriorating economic outlook in remarks to Parliament. He's warned that the country's inflation rate will peak at almost 8% by the end of the year.
The current expectation is that it will get worse this year, moderate next year, and normalise the year after. We haven't reached the peak yet, but we can see it from here.
He pointed out that some of the factors affecting inflation were outside of Australia's control, including China's COVID-19 policies.
That undermines energy and food security and dramatically pushes up global prices. And all of this puts pressure on our economy and our budget.
Chalmers' statement came after the release of new figures showing inflation as of June this year rose by 1% since March.
A British industry leader confirms that UK companies are leaving China. Let's take a closer look at why and what's driving the shift.
British businesses are cutting ties with China, reportedly because of concerns tied to rising political tensions. The head of the Confederation of British Industry, Tony Danker, said Saturday that every company he speaks to is rethinking their supply chains. That's because they anticipate that our politicians will inevitably accelerate towards a decoupled world from China. China was Britain's biggest source of imports last year, accounting for 13% of its total. But British security concerns have risen in recent years, fueled by many disagreements, including over Hong Kong. Last week, the head of the UK's intelligence service said China has become the country's top security concern over counter-terrorism. Britain has also increasingly blocked Chinese takeovers of companies on national security grounds. On top of that, the remaining candidates for UK Prime Minister have said they intend to take a tougher line on China. Back to Danker, he mentioned U.S. influence has also played a role, noting how growing U.S. concern about China has made British companies more wary about being dependent on Chinese suppliers.